Are you looking for adventure? Do you want to find peace? Long-distance trails offer you freedom and discovery. They offer a way to connect to yourself and to the world around you at the same time. The most popular trails have become crowded, but there are so many other trails that have plenty of space. The Trails Around the World podcast is here to introduce you to new trails and to new types of trails and to expand your horizons. Join me as we explore, finding out what is possible and how to do it. Welcome to the Trails Around the World podcast. Having moved back to the United States last summer, I finally participated in the Everglades Challenge in Florida during the first week of March this year. My sailing partner and I did not complete the course. Many people said it was the worst year ever for sailboats. But it was a great experience anyway, and I accomplished my goals of learning more about the event, gaining experience towards doing it again next year in my own boat, and connecting with the other participants in the event. My preparations for the Everglades Challenge are a large part of the reason that I haven't published any podcast episodes since December. I intend to produce episodes about the sea and other boat adventures in the near future. For this episode, I am trying something new. I am rebroadcasting an interview from another podcast. I listened to it and felt that it covered most of the questions that I would have asked, so I contacted the interviewee and gained her permission, and then contacted the podcaster, and he was glad to share. One of the best experiences of my life was hiking the Alpine section of the GR5, which is a trail from Lake Geneva to the Mediterranean, in 2007 and 2009. I section hiked it with friends, and I was working in Geneva at the time. I lived in Nyon in Switzerland, just a few hundred meters from where the GR5 passed through that town. Hiking the entire E2, which is part of the European E-routes, of which the GR5 is a part, has been one of my goals ever since then. James and Amy, who told us about the Tokai Shizen Hodo and the GR34 in episodes 5, 6, and 13 of this podcast, started the GR5, but then left the trail and went to hike the GR34, as they relate at the beginning of episode 13. James and Amy's reasons for leaving the GR5 corroborated with some other complaints about it that I had heard at that time, and seemed to be a result of both the effects of climate change and the explosion in the popularity of hiking. The refuges were too crowded, particularly where the GR5 coincides with the Tour de Mont Blanc, where the reservations for refuges are dominated by tour companies. Even more alarming, the ancient water sources that the trail relies on have become less reliable due to climate change. I still think it's very worthwhile to look into doing that trail, but you should investigate those potential issues. Kathy Elkind and her husband hiked the GR5 from the North Sea to the Mediterranean in 2018, crossing the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. This is substantially more than the trail that I did, and certainly the sections north of Lake Geneva don't have the problems that I just mentioned. Kathy wrote a book about the experience, and I am halfway through it. It is wonderful. The Elkinds were recently retired in 2018, and I particularly like her perspective and the approach that she has taken to telling this story. Long-distance trails are wonderful for so many reasons. Kathy discusses the rewards of slow travel, which I interpret to be borrowing meaning from the slow food movement. She discusses the new way of experiencing her relationship with her husband of more than 30 years in the context of this trip. And as a teacher of mindful self-compassion, she discusses how walking this sort of trip is not only a way of experiencing foreign countries and cultures, immersing oneself in nature, seeing oneself in the mirror created by the experience, but also how this type of walking constitutes a form of long-term and intense meditation. I feel that these are aspects of long-distance trails that people often don't acknowledge and sometimes don't even realize. At the same time, she discusses the ways in which they recognized their own limitations, differences, and tastes, and accommodated those by bicycling for the first week and staying in lodgings every night. In addition to my own comments about congestion and the effects of climate change on the GR5 trail, and that's, of course, only south of Lake Geneva, as I mentioned, I will point out that the refuges in the alpine section of this route are generally open from early July to early September. You should be careful to check ahead and reserve when possible. I hiked the Grand Traverse from Lake Geneva to Nice, France, in 28 days, and I only camped for one night out of that time. It is possible to camp or bivouac, as the French would say, for more of the nights. In addition to the mountain passes, the glacial valleys, the castles and forts and old Roman roads, one of the most rewarding parts of this trip was staying in the 500-year-old farmhouses that are used as refuges along the way and enjoying the food. I highly recommend Kathy Elkind's book, which is titled To Walk It Is to See It, and is available from booksellers everywhere, and also the podcast that conducted this interview, which is called the Zero to Travel podcast and is published by Jason Moore. I thank them both for allowing me to share this with you.
What I personally loved about it was it's village to village. So we were staying in small hotels or hostels, and then eventually gîtes and auberges and mountain huts, mountain refuges. So all different types of places to stay, but basically food, a warm meal at night, most of the time hot showers, not every time, and breakfast in the morning. And we picnicked every single day, pretty much.
That's Kathy Elkind, today's guest, sharing a bit about her experience walking with her husband for 3 months plus on the GR5, one of Europe's famous long-distance trails that runs from the Netherlands through Belgium and Luxembourg and covers France from north to south. An epic journey. She had never done anything like this before. Of course, we talk about that. We love exploring the different ways you can travel the world, and this certainly is one of them, whether you consider this exact trail or another trail experience that takes you from village to village somewhere else in the world. You've got plenty of options. This episode will give you a great idea about what that experience is like for the traveler. And like any trip, this one came with its challenges.
Obviously, walking with your husband for 98 days, there's going to be some suffering and or just walking.
You'll get to hear more about the entire experience in this show. Kathy's also a mindful self-compassion coach. We get some incredible practical techniques for calming yourself, for soothing yourself. Self-compassion, something you can do whether you're home or abroad, and much more coming at you in this episode right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, what's up? It's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show, my friend. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. I love these conversations around human-powered travel, and especially when it's with somebody who had never done anything like this before, dives in. You're really going to get a lot of takeaways in this interview, and not just about the trip. Of course, we cover the practical logistics of this particular trail, but you get to hear about that experience as a traveler, what it's like going on foot through several countries, and what happens when two people who want two different types of adventures want to plan a trip together. You're going to get some advice for finding that compromise that works for everybody, and keep an ear out for the term wise strength, which is something that Kathy shares. I really appreciated this, and I'll have more thoughts around this term on the back end of the interview, along with a quote to send you on your way. Check out Kathy's work over at kathyelkind.com. We'll link up to that in the show notes. And don't forget, if you haven't done so yet, zerototravel.com/newsletter. Sign up to join the community off the podcast over there. Get the free weekly newsletter. Let's get into the conversation with Kathy, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Thanks for listening. Kathy Elkind, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
Thank you, Jason. I'm excited to be here.
Are you in Vermont now?
Yes, I am in Vermont.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, because I just kind of imagine you sipping coffee on a porch in Vermont or something somewhere. I don't know why. It sounds like a nice Vermont thing to do. Vermont has its own unique kind of culture, I feel.
Oh, yes. Yes, it does. And, we've been here 6 years, so we're still new.
Okay. Where did you move from?
We lived in Massachusetts beforehand, and that's where I grew up in Massachusetts, and that's where we raised our children, and about 40 miles outside of Boston. And then in 2017, we moved up here full time. We had been coming up to ski on winter weekends.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I wanted to hear, since you have a somewhat fresh perspective, I guess, right? I mean, you guys you didn't grow up there, you didn't live there. Can you describe Vermont culture for us?
True old Vermont culture is, we probably haven't broken into. There's a big tourist industry, and, we actually, came up as weekenders. And then slowly the Mad River Valley where we live, there's a lot of arts and culture. Many people came up in the 60s. Sort of the hippie group came up in the 60s. And so that started to change the traditional farms and things like that. But there's still some dairy farms around. And then farming has had a resurgence with trying to have fresh food. So there's some wonderful CSAs around here. Great farm stands. Fresh food is really good. And many of the farmers have figured out how to grow food all year round with cold houses and picking vegetables that grow well, even in the cold. So that's wonderful. We love that part.
Are you thriving there? Are you guys enjoying your life there?
Thriving? Yes, I am thriving. I am thriving. It's a 12-minute drive to get to, wonderful hiking and skiing. So we're very lucky.
I love Vermont. I feel like it's the closest state in terms of kind of geography and feel to Norway, where I live, in a way. You got the mountains, you got a lot of farms, you got, of course, two totally different places, but it's always been an intriguing place to me. There's like those set of destinations that you're like, I could live there. I guess Vermont was that for you, and then you're like, all right, well, let's just go there then.
Exactly. Yeah.
How long have you been married?
Now it's 30, it'll be 33 years next month. So quite a while.
That's a magical number, the 33. Well, I mean, I bring it up because your husband's going to play a prominent role in this conversation, I think, in some ways. Because,
yes, he is. Yep.
You guys did some walking together, and I'm very attracted to these long distance trails in Europe. I wish I knew about these trail systems when I was a younger traveler, because I was just talking to another listener in this community I met up with in the city the other day about this. It was one of those things that, like, I just didn't know these things were around, and it would have been a really cool way to experience a destination. And you have done the GR5 and some other walks, it sounds like. So I'm curious to get some of the advice around planning and all that, but also I want to hear about the journey itself from your perspective and how it was for you guys. And I don't want to forget the book too. To walk it is to see it. One couple, 98 days, 1,400 miles on Europe's GR5. And that title kind of says it all. It's like, oh, what happened to that couple? 98 days together. Is that a lot? Is that too much time together, Kathy?
Well, I'll answer that a little bit later. But I'll start off saying, so when we did move up to Vermont, we kind of thought, well, this is the perfect time to take an adult gap year before we jump into a new community. So we researched and asked people questions, what should we do? And as you said, my husband is much more hardcore than I am. He would go, bicycle around the world if he could, or something like that. He just has much more energy than I do. And I'm an outdoorsy person, but at this point in my life, when we started, I was 57 when we started this adventure. I didn't want to carry a heavy pack anymore. We had done backpacking, when we were younger, and we actually did it with our kids and things like that. But I didn't want to carry a heavy pack. I didn't really want to camp anymore. I'm happy to go camp for a couple of nights, but I don't want to camp day after day. So we just kept asking people, and we ended up running into a Frenchman. And I always think synchronicity is a big part of these searches. And he talked about walking the GR5, which I had never heard of, Grand Randonnee Cinq, if I said it correctly. And he had actually walked the Alps part, which is from Lake Geneva down to Nice, which is also called the Grand Traverse. And that's the very well-known part of the GR5. But I either didn't hear that or listen. And I went and Googled GR5, and I found that it starts in Hoek van Holland in the Netherlands and goes through Belgium, Luxembourg, and then the whole length of France. And I'm like, wow, this sounds kind of cool. And what I personally loved about it was it's village to village. So we were staying in small hotels or hostels, and then eventually gîtes and auberges and mountain huts, mountain refuges. So all different types of places to stay, but basically food, a warm meal at night, most of the time hot showers, not every time, and breakfast in the morning. And we picnicked every single day, pretty much.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like it was a good compromise, for at least the way you described to your husband, being like, he would just bike around the world tomorrow. And you're like, I want a little more comfort. And this is kind of the best of both worlds in some ways.
Exactly. Yep. It was a compromise. And then I personally, part of what I like about travel is doing the research. So I read a bunch of blogs and books, and I kept reading, especially in the beginning, that it was flat. The Netherlands are flat, the canals, and northern Belgium is flat too. And I also talked about being on bike paths and a fair amount of pavement, which I was like, that doesn't sound good. And I was a little worried that Jim was going to mutiny. So I suggested that we bike the first week. And that actually worked out very well. And that would have been about 3 weeks of walking. So we did, I don't know, walkers would say we cheated a little, but the way I look at it is that we just adapted the adventure to make it work for us. So we rented bikes actually in Amsterdam and rode down, and the tulips just happened to be blooming, which is also another cool. I hadn't paid attention that the tulips were going to be blooming, and we got to see those, which was so dramatic. These swaths of color on the flat landscape were just spectacular. And then we biked for a week on the GR5, and we paid a little extra to have the owner of the bike shop from Amsterdam drive down and pick up our bikes. So that worked out really well.
Had you done any larger scale, let's call them adventures like this, where it's 98 days? So you're talking about over 3 months of human-powered travel, not like a week, not a weekend, but over 3 months out there. Had you done anything like that before?
No, we had not at all. The longest I think we had done is, a week of backpacking or a week of biking. So that was this is definitely the longest. We really didn't know what we had gotten ourselves into. I had done a lot of research, and Jim had done a lot of research too. So I feel like we had done our homework.
You mentioned the synchronicity. It never ceases to amaze me how many conversations I've had with people on this podcast and off the podcast where, we have access to all this information, right, on the internet, just unlimited amounts of blogs and YouTube videos and blah, blah. But still, a lot of people end up at destinations or doing things because somebody told them about it. Some person told them about it, and they had a conversation. They just started vibing the idea and being like, okay, yeah, you looked up all the information later. But I don't know. I just wanted to point that out because I always think that's cool, and never underestimate the power of a of a good conversation with another human.
Yes, I totally agree. And I believe in putting it out there, like say out into the universe, we're looking for some trip that's going to work for both of us, or, and being open to having the answers come to you.
Is that part of your operating system as far as life? Are you a believer in? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I gotten older, I think I'm believing it more and more and trusting it more and more.
What do you think that is?
It's a little bit of faith in spirit, or faith in the flow of life, and what we are meant to, why we are here on earth. And I do believe that we were meant to do this walk. And then when I came home, I hadn't planned on writing the book. I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I hadn't planned on writing the book. But when I got home, I just couldn't stop thinking about the walk, and I missed it. And it was just such an amazing experience. Jim and I did a few slideshows to share with people, but I still couldn't get away from it. So I ended up starting to write about it. And I had done some writing for my business, writing a blog and things like that. But I'd never thought about, I sort of thought about writing a memoir, but I never really knew what I was going to write about. And here it came to me. So I just feel like I wanted to share the idea of slow travel and slow walking at what you said, the human pace is, it's pretty special.
You just said you couldn't get away from it. What do you mean? Why couldn't you get away from it? You mean the impact it was having on you?
Yes, the impact it was having on me. And I had a business down in Massachusetts, and I was trying to bring it up and work on it, switch it up to Vermont. And it just wasn't working. I couldn't find an office. Things just kept not working. So I felt like the universe was telling me, don't go that direction. I offered some workshops, and, people showed up, but not a lot of people. And I think I also was tired. I didn't want to put a whole bunch of effort into restarting my business. It just wasn't in the flow. It wasn't working. But the idea of writing just really appealed to me. And once I sat down and just started writing the story, basically I just wrote the stories that I remembered, and then later went back and looked at, I had written a journal, basically just a paragraph each day. And Jim had kept a journal too, a paragraph each day. And the whole writing was a whole process in itself.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been in that situation. Sometimes it's hard to listen to or tune into what is in the flow and what isn't, I mean, you could have easily just like, all right, well, I got to make this business work, and just try to kind of like bullet your way through it, and just make it happen. Right. Instead of kind of relaxing into the intuition a bit and thinking, all right, well, what am I actually drawn to right now? Where's this? I'm going
What's
somewhere else.
Pulling me?
Yeah. It's not always an easy thing to do.
And it's from an act of privilege too.
Yeah, absolutely. Did the walk help you tune into some of that stuff for yourself?
Yes. Yeah. Obviously, 3 months of walking. And as you talked about, so Jim and I, we sort of fell into a pattern of walking, not chatting in the morning. We would talk to say, well, we got to go, here and here. But we walked, we could see each other, but we walked separately. One of us was in front and the other person was behind, and that switched constantly. But we had a lot of alone time, or, I don't call it, solitude, time with yourself and time with nature. And even though it's village to village, many of the European villages, because the villages are densely populated, it doesn't take long to get out into the rolling fields or the woods, and you're out there in nature and basically meditating. It's a walking meditation for hours and hours, and tuning into what your body is feeling. And I'm a mindful self-compassion teacher too, so I definitely, and as anybody who's taken yoga classes, meditation classes, any of that kind of thing. And over the years, and being in your late 50s, you've had a lot of experience. And I think this whole experience, it gave me the chance to tune into all of this, I don't want to call it stuff, all these different practices that I had practiced, but then really integrated them. I really integrated them into my body during this whole walk. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So it's not just the hypothetical or the mindset, but actually practicing the teaching or the mindset, actually implementing it in a way. That's really cool. Well, I didn't know you were a mindful self-compassion teacher. Talk about that.
I'm actually supposed to say a teacher of mindful self-compassion. So let's see. Kristen Neff is sort of a PhD professor of self-compassion. And Christopher Germer was a mindfulness teacher. And the two of them got together. And the whole idea is that we all suffer. And when we suffer, when a friend suffers, we give them compassion. But sometimes a friend isn't there. A friend or a family member isn't there to give you compassion. So you need to learn to give yourself compassion. I'll try to make a long story short. So growing up, I had dyslexia, which is I didn't learn to read till about 7th grade. Which as a little girl, not reading is a very difficult thing. And I had a lot of shame around it. I didn't feel like the other girls. I felt different. And it was a lot of shame. So even though my parents helped, I got lots of support and help. The shame of not being able to be like everybody else, being different. So I used food to numb and soothe my emotions. And that sort of straggled through my life, this wanting to eat. And so I actually became an eating psychology coach. And that process of, I really enjoyed being an eating psychology coach, but I still felt like there was something missing. And I was reading one of Brene Brown's books, and she talked about the antidote to shame is self-compassion. And in that same sentence, she mentioned Kristen Neff. So I signed up for her class and, trained in it, or took the class. And then a year or two later, I took the teacher training. And I taught it for about 4 years, I would say. And the idea is that first of all, mindfulness, noticing that you're having a difficult time, which we all do as being human, that's part of the human experience, is some suffering. And then giving yourself compassion, putting your hand on your chest or somewhere gently, that self-touch, just gently, and shifting your tone of voice to like, ooh, this is hard. And saying whatever you would say to a friend, but saying it to yourself. And you don't have to say it out loud, but just giving yourself compassion. And obviously walking with your husband for 98 days, there's going to be some suffering and or just walking, because you may get into town and realize that the place that you're staying is another 2 kilometers on the other side of town, and you still have to coach yourself and give yourself compassion to get across town. And when your feet are exhausted and your back is sore, and so that's a long answer to what is mindful self-compassion.
Okay, yeah. So going back to what you said with integrating it into your body is kind of a walk like this presents those opportunities to actually implement those practices in real time, because you may be confronted with more uncomfortable things more often than you would perhaps at home when you're on a journey like this. You mentioned putting your hand on your heart, having a calming tone of voice and speaking to yourself and things like that. Are there any other tools that you could share with people that would help them get into that self-compassion state? Because this is where I mean, this is a thing a lot of people struggle with, right? Like you're beating yourself up because you did this or that the other day, or maybe you're not in a certain place where you want to be in your career or in life. Could be like big like that, or it could be a small daily thing. There's a lot of opportunities to practice self-compassion, I feel, at least for me.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so I'd love to hear any more you have to share on that topic. I mean, I think this advice also obviously translates to, you can use these tools anywhere in the world, like you just discussed. So,
Yeah. Well, again, I'll go a little bit deeper into the practice of mindfulness, of actually realizing that you are beating yourself up. So many times we're stuck in these patterns. And then, so even noticing, oh, wait a minute, I'm beating myself up, and stopping it is number one. Just the noticing, awareness, which is basically mindfulness. So that's a practice in itself. And the idea why you put your hand on your heart is when you put your hand on your heart or on your chest, you can actually feel the warmth and the pressure. So warmth and pressure actually releases some oxytocin, a little bit. So it's actually a hormonal change. And and many times when you're beating yourself up, also there's this stress level. So that's a way of releasing the stress. And then again, which this again takes practice, shifting that tone of voice to, oh dear. And it sounds a little corny at first. It takes practice, like, oh, sweetie, this is hard, or, oh, you're having a bad day. And we're not trying to fix anything. We're just trying to comfort someone. So when you try to comfort a friend, you're not trying to fix them, because they don't really want to be fixed. They just want to be comforted, and they just want some kindness. So bringing kindness into your voice and bringing words like, ooh, this is hard. And, you're having a bad day. Does that make sense? There's subtle little pieces. And again, it was hard for me to do that, to learn to be, again, it sounds corny, but the more you do it, the better you sink into the practice.
Yeah, I love it. The idea of comforting yourself is something worth trying. I feel like, how can that hurt? Yeah, those are great techniques for just being with yourself, comforting yourself, like you mentioned, and how can that not have some kind of effect? I mean, yeah, listen, I'll try it out.
Yeah.
Why not?
Wait, can I add one more thing?
Please.
So if you go to the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, they have a bunch of meditations. And one of them is, it's a breathing one, breathing in compassion for yourself and breathing out compassion for either the rest of the world, or you can just pick one person. And they're guided meditations, and they're anywhere from, 10 to 15 minutes. But so it's the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. And that, that's a good first step.
Okay, great. The GR5, I want to get your advice around the trail planning. I want to talk more, of course, about your experience and some of the transformation perhaps you experienced by committing to and doing the walk. But just for people that are interested, like myself, in these longer distance trails, particularly around Europe, where you have, as you mentioned, the option to, sleep in these cute villages and slow travel and explore lesser explored parts of Europe that most tourists aren't coming through just because they're not doing these types of walks. I want to hear about the travel experience, but also how would you tackle this for somebody that's, like, wow, this GR5 sounds awesome. Or I can't remember how many, I just looked it up before. There are like, how many other long distance paths in Europe? Something like, there's a bunch of them, basically. I'd imagine that some of the advice you share from your experience, because it's such a long walk, can translate to some of the other trails. So do you want me to like kind of start with one question, or do you just want to start to lay it out there?
Because why don't you start with one question?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of planning, how much do you need to book in advance, let's say? Did you meet other I know you guys weren't camping along the way, but if you're carrying a tent and all, I imagine people can camp along the way. There's different laws in each country, of course. Yeah, just with tackling it, with being like, all right, how are we gonna break this up? Are we gonna do it, X amount of kilometers or miles a day? And then are we gonna pre-book everything? Are we just gonna find accommodations along the way for the whole thing or for just these parts? Yeah, like I have no idea how you tackled this.
Well, I'll start out with the GR5, and I'll tell you what we've learned too. So the GR5, again, we read as many books and blogs that we could, and there are now 3 books about the GR5. When we were walking back in 2018, there was not a guidebook for the northern section, but I did find a blog, and it turns out that was the author of who ended up writing the guidebook. So we followed their blog in the northern section. And then there is another Cicerone. Are you familiar with Cicerone? I might not be pronouncing it correct. Cicerone.
They do a lot of the walking guides.
Yes, a lot of the walking guides. So there's a walking guide for the Vosges and the Jura, which are 2 mountain ranges just north of Lake Geneva. And then there's a whole nother guidebook for the Alps, because that's 5 weeks of walking. So the guidebooks really do tell you, go from this village to this village. We averaged about 12 miles. And also remember, everything in Europe is in kilometers. So, and in the beginning, we really didn't even know what our pace was. We knew roughly that we were sort of probably an average walker, which it turns out that's what we were. So in the beginning, we were started in the late April, and we knew things weren't going to be too busy at that point. So we booked out 2 days in advance, or 2 or 3 days in advance. The one thing we had not realized is there are a lot of different holidays in the springtime. And so Mondays were holidays in some places, and that it all worked out, but we had a few little surprises. As we got down into June and July, we did in the Alps. We did book out 2 weeks, 2 weeks at a time, because we just wanted to know that we had a place to stay. And then now we have learned that I think if you showed up at a refuge and you did not have a place to stay, they would let you stay on the floor. They're not going to push you out. So they would give you a place to stay, but we didn't really know that at the time. So we did. And also, being in our late 50s, again, I liked knowing that we had a place booked out. And eventually we learned that our pace was 4 kilometers an hour, which gave us time to stop and have, snacks and go to the bathroom, whatever. It was a good average pace. One of the best books that helped me plan for the GR5 is a book actually that's out of print now. And it 2 women from the U.S. walk the GR5 in, where's my list of, in 1984. And it's walking Europe from top to bottom. And that you can get it from secondhand bookstores. And what's neat about that is they have each section, they have a picture of each section of the walk in a map, and then even how many hours it took them to get from place to place. So that was very helpful. So I'm kind of a big picture thinker, and I would be the one who'd say, all right, we're going to go to here, to here, to here. And then we also we've made spreadsheets, or just on a piece of paper, like the distance you're going to do, the name of the village, the date, the contact, the phone number, and the address. And then you have to remember to put the address either in your calendar or right onto your GPS, whatever GPS we use, Gaia. And so it's a lot of, it's a lot of work. But again, we find it fun.
spreadsheets and long walks always go hand in hand, right? I mean, that's the first thing you think of is a good spreadsheet. No. What about the cost? And I know that you guys stayed in places every night and things like that. And I mentioned the camping thing. I was just assuming that it can be done cheaper, and perhaps you ran into some other travelers doing it that way. I'm just curious if you have a sort of a range of what it might cost somebody to take this adventure on.
Well, you definitely could do it cheaper. We ran into people who were wild camping or camping. Many of the Europeans that we saw, the Dutch love to walk, and the French love to walk, and many of them would do 2 or 3 weeks at a time every year, and then go back and to continue on. And so wild camping, and we ran into 2 older Dutch women, and they ended up running into people that said, "Oh, just come camp in our yard." But there were campgrounds and things like that. So yes, you could do it cheaper. There were also more youth, hostels that were possibilities, and municipal gîtes. As you get many of the towns, especially as you get into the Alps and the Jura, have municipal gîtes, which is basically a hostel that's run by the town because they want walkers to come through. And, some of them were, €16 a night for a bed. And so it was, you could do it much more inexpensively than we did. We would go back and forth between staying in gîtes and a little bit nicer, but we stayed in one fancy place, and that was kind of fun. It's part of the.
Do you have any idea what you spent?
I don't have the exact number. I want to, like Jim would say, but I don't think this has ever. He kept track of things. He would say, not including the flight or anything like that, he would say it was $5,000 for the 3 months. But I think we spent a little bit more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But still,
I was going to guess like somewhere between 8 and 10 or something like that.
Yeah. I think that's a closer guess.
Sleeping in hotels and things like that. And yeah, but like I said, I mean, so it sounds like probably can be done anywhere between 2 or 3 to 10, depending on, I suppose there's people that, all ends of the spectrum, right? Somebody could probably do it for no money and, pick berries along the way. Who knows? But and you can always do the couch surfing thing and other things like that. But I mean, you kind of laid out how you wanted to do the trip and where you guys are at in life and how that relates to how you design this trip, which I think is an important point. Whether you're taking a traditional, let's call it backpacking trip, or something like this where you're off for an adventure for three or 4 months on a long walk, still knowing thyself and kind of planning around, you're like, okay, I need this level of comfort to kind of make this overall enjoyable. Not that you're not going to have challenges and things aren't going to be tough, but yeah, I think that's a good thing to consider too. So the walking as a couple part, I mean, that's the tagline in your book, one couple, 98 days, 1,400 miles. Okay. What was the conclusion there? Do you guys, did anything change? Was it just like, oh, we just got to spend more time together? Or did you have any shifts in your relationship along the way or after that? Because of the trip?
There were a couple of sort of surprises. And one of them was, in some ways, we actually sort of, not bickered, but, in some ways there was less confrontation because we were kind of united. It was like the two of us, again, not against the world, but, moving through the world and supporting each other. And even in the planning stages, we've been married so long, we know that each of us are better at doing different tasks. And so we each picked, our strengths and worked with those. And that always makes life more, flow better. And so again, while we were walking together in the beginning, we were, very united and, watching out for each other. And we were both maybe nervous at different times, but supporting each other. It wasn't until we got down to Lake Geneva towards the end of just before the Alps, and we had 2.5 days off. And I feel like we just sort of let down our guard. And that's when the teeny, the little stuff, like anything he did was just bugging me. And I'm sure anything I was doing bugged him. And that's the other thing I noticed, and this I think I noticed because from writing the book, is that when you're at home, I don't know, the things that we argue about is like who loaded the dishwasher the wrong way, or who used this but didn't put it away. The silly little things. But when we were traveling, we each had our own. We didn't have too much communal equipment to fight over or to argue with, and life was in some ways it was simpler. We had just the clothes on our back. You got up every morning and put pretty much the same clothes on. There weren't all those decisions to make. Obviously we had to decide, when we were planning. That was probably the more difficult days. But again, that time in Geneva when the little things started bugging us and we did argue more. I think it was just the letdown a little bit. And then luckily we had friends come over and meet us in the Alps, and we walked with them for a week, and that was just lovely to have.
Oh, nice.
Some outside people.
Yeah, that's a great tip too. You kind of have somebody join you, just to keep it fresh for a period of the walk. Did you find that you, just from this experience, that you have lived your life differently in any way afterwards?
So when we moved up to Massachusetts, we got rid of a lot of our stuff anyway. So I was, shedding and getting rid of things and simplifying life. And so that was my intention to not, I don't need 4 pairs of sandals. I just need 1 pair of sandals. So I have set the intention of being more simplified with clothing and things like that. I have not gone to the extreme. Sometimes I still see a nice dress that I want, but I think I have brought simplicity and a little bit of minimalism into my life now, more into my life. And as far as Jim, the act of writing actually brought us together too, because when you have to write the dialogue of your spouse as true to as it can, I realized there were some of the times maybe I was wrong and he was right. And so that was a whole experience in itself. And, Jim read the different drafts, and there were a few times he's like, well, let's not share that. And I'm like, that's okay. And so, we share a lot in the book, but we don't share everything. And I feel like our love for each other and our respect for each other has grown through the process of walking and writing about it. Because as you're writing about it, you totally are reliving the whole, all the stories.
Right. Seeing it from all angles and trying to figure out how to relay the stories. But Kathy, we all know the husband's never right. Come on. Let's not get ourselves.
I don't know. Sometimes the husbands are right.
On occasion. Were there any, what would you say was the biggest realization for you? You lead a life up to a trip like this, and you have other trips in life and whatever, and then you have a trip like this. And so you can't always just attribute transformations to one particular trip. You can't just parse out everything else in life. But at the same time, you often find that when you reflect upon these things, whether it's immediately afterwards, or you mentioned becoming more minimalistic, which is, I would say, like adopting a new value in a way, there are things that you can kind of directly relate back to a trip or a travel experience. And I'm just wondering, for you, was there anything else in terms of a self-realization, or, you mentioned in the book description some of the things you talked about already, struggling with the shame from before with the dyslexia and some of the things. I imagine you were contemplating during the walk? And, it doesn't have to be some big thing. Maybe there was no realization. I'm just curious for you.
Yeah, I think basically I found, or I began to trust my body more. And through the whole process, because I did struggle in the beginning, figuring out, I began to trust my own pace of walking and really listening to my body. And so I sort of call it wise strength. I feel like the word strength, we need more words in the English language for the word strength, because strength for a 20-year-old is very different than strength for a 60-year-old. So again, I call it sort of wise strength. I can walk across a continent. I've proved that to myself. So I am stronger, than I think. And I think many women and men are strong, we're all stronger than we think. But we have to do it at our own pace. I guess that's what I've learned is not the external pace of the world and not even our spouse's pace. We have to trust our own pace. And and I think that translates to, emotional strength and heart strength too. Trusting yourself. And I never used to really hike by myself. And now even day hikes, I didn't used to. And now I'm perfectly happy to go hike on the long trail for a full day and just enjoy the solitude. I don't have to be with other people. And again, back to when I was writing it, I did go on long walks to help me get myself back into the pace of walking and the meditation. And it really helped, different words would come to me and phrases and things like that. So, strength.
Wise strength. I love that. I love that the realization for you was body-based. I guess I tend to think that we focus so much on the thinking and our mindset, or how we think our way into the next situation, or try to find our purpose by getting into our thinking mind. But this is one of the big benefits, you could say, of human powered travels. It really forces you back into your body, and that can play a big role, obviously, in life as well. I mean, it's huge, right? It's just something, I don't know. We're so used to thinking about all of this stuff. It's just, how about just good old fashioned get back into the body and kind of see what comes out from that? Because I think a lot of this, you mentioned wise strength. I mean, maybe some of that wisdom just comes from the body up instead of the top down.
Yes, completely. And one of the interesting things I noticed is, so I was doing small YouTube videos for my business and talking about body image and things like that. But what I noticed is when I was hiking uphill, I would get more ideas, and that's when I would say, "Oh, I got to do a video," and I'd just pull out my phone. And sometimes I was just talking into the phone to remember ideas and things like that. But I definitely got more ideas going uphill, and I don't know the science behind it, but I found that really interesting that I got many more ideas, flooded with ideas as I walked uphill, and the blood pumping through your body as you go uphill. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's why they say it's all downhill from there, right? You get all the ideas going up, and then it's all downhill from there.
Yeah.
For better or worse. No, I agree. I when I walk, and it's something about, when you're exerting, again, I don't know the science behind it either. I wish I did. Then I could go on I could start quoting scientific journals or something, but I'm not that kind of podcaster. Sorry, folks. Yeah. Something about when you're exerting effort, it shuts down the thinking mind enough where it actually just gets flooded with all of the ideas from your subconscious or something. I don't know. Same thing happens to me. And it's one of those things that I try to remember. Maybe this is we'll throw out a challenge for somebody listening today. When I want to take a break from work, we tend to think about walking or like just going outside for a walk as like, well, I'm not being productive. I could be sending like these 40 emails right now and I got to do this, this, and this. But actually just taking the break and just taking the walk or the run or the exercise or whatever is being productive, if you want to look at it that way, because you're giving your brain a chance to breathe and you're giving yourself an opportunity to be flooded with these ideas and these creative visions. And so it's how I've been able to reframe kind of like, oh, I'm too busy, I don't have time for this. Well, no, like you make time for it because this benefits everything.
Yes, 100%.
I hope that wasn't too much of a rant, but
No. I 100% believe that. Yeah.
You guys mentioned this as being an adult gap year. What did you do? What else did you do? Sounds like it was a half year, but did you do anything else after the hike or before?
Not after, but before. Before we went, we actually flew to southern Italy to so Jim and I, we're into brainstorming. As we were brainstorming our gap year, I wanted to live in the city because we had just moved to the country in Vermont. I wanted to live in the city. So we actually went to Naples for 10 days. It wasn't all that long, but 10 days in Naples, which is a very interesting city. And, most people go to Rome or Florence or something, but we decided to go to Naples and stayed there for 10 days. And then we went and walked in the Amalfi Coast. And then we went down to Sicily for about a month and just did day walks in Sicily, just getting in shape and, falling into the European way of life of longer meals and delicious longer meals. And that's how we got, that was one way that we got in shape for, we carried day packs, not our full packs, but then, and then we flew up to the Netherlands and started the GR5. But no, after the GR5, we were done with our gap year. So we were in Europe 5.5 weeks, but I also include the 3 months beforehand when we were doing all the research as the gap year. I really do.
Yeah. Cool. And you guys carried everything yourselves, right? There was no service that took, you just have to pack your stuff and go. Any tips on the packing side of things?
Again, simplicity. Find the pair of shorts that you love and the shirt you love. I have fair skin and I didn't want to get burnt, and we were in, May and June, so in July. So sun shirts, really good sun hat. It took me a while to find the right sun hat that wouldn't get blown off. I carried an iPad mini to take notes. And we also, we have adult children and we both have parents alive. So it was important for us in the evenings to connect, be able to connect and, FaceTime with our family. And we didn't totally close off. We used our phones for Gaia for our GPS, but we would turn off, I wasn't looking at Facebook or anything like that while I was walking. I definitely wanted to be turned off during the daytime, but in the evening time, we did connect with the outside world, and it also helped with planning, obviously. Anything else about, I used walking poles. Jim did not use walking poles. You have to find out, what works for you. I can't think of, I'm one of these days, I'm going to start, I do have a packing list and I'm going to put it up on my website. It's not up yet.
It's all good. The concept of slow travel, it seems like you got pretty passionate about that, and tying in with this question of some of the characters you met along the way, some of the opportunities you had slow traveling, as opposed to if you were doing it a different way. You want to just share, in your opinion, what some of those benefits are of this type of travel?
As you're walking, I think also having a backpack, people are more apt to stop and talk to you, especially in France. The first 10 minutes that we were in France, we ran into an older couple who were walking, and he stopped and, asked me in French, "Where are you walking?" And my French is not all that good, so I answered him in English. And then he said, "Oh, I just love to walk." And, we had this little conversation, and he was the one who said, to walk it is to see it. And what he meant is to walk a country is to see a country. So when you have a backpack on and you are walking, people will stop and chat with you. And I think walking into a small hotel with a backpack on too, they know that you haven't just come in on a quick bus tour and you're going to, spend an hour or spend the night and be gone. And yes, we were spending the night, but, asking for if the hotel didn't have, or the place we were staying didn't have a restaurant, you ask them where, good ideas, like all travel. But I think the walking, people have more compassion for you and want to connect. And then obviously through the Alps, many other Europeans are doing, that's more of a real active trail. So we ran into other walkers and we would see them, for a while we'd be on the same pattern with them, which is similar to people walking the Appalachian Trail where you get to know people day after day. And they were, we got to know an Austrian, we got to know a couple, one from England, one from France. So it was just a great way to get to know other travelers. And that's when we started hearing about all these other trips, like the GR20, which is walking across Corsica, the GR10 and the GR11, which is across the French Pyrenees and the Spanish Pyrenees. So, or the Spanish side, and then the coast to coast in England. All these trails I had not really been, I guess I had heard of the coast to coast in England, but that was about the only one I had heard of. So talking trails was a lot of fun.
You gearing up for the next one, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you though? I mean, I'm serious. Are you?
Well, we are right now. I'm working. The book just came out, so my adventure is bringing the book out into the world. But yes, we are. One of the ones top high on my list is Munich to Venice, which is a 30-day walk, and I love the idea of walking out of Munich and then you go through the German Alps, the Austrian Alps, and then the Dolomites, and then down into Venice. That one sounds really,
What's that
I guess
one
many
called?
Germans do. The guidebook just calls it Munich to Venice. I think it's called The Way, but it's in German. So I need to find out exactly. I don't remember the name of that one.
That's great. It's a lot of inspiration, I think, in this episode for exploring some of these opportunities to slow travel in a unique way and to explore Europe. I love that these trails exist. I love that they're maintained. I love that you can get up and get out on one. I appreciate you taking the time to share your experience out on it. I should mention the book one more time. To walk it is to see it. And I know you have all the links on your website, which we'll link to in the show notes. Do you have any other places you want people to find you or get in touch, or is your homepage the best?
The homepage is the best. Also Instagram, if you want to see pictures. And on my website, I have pictures from the GR5 too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Any other resources you wanted to share? You mentioned some great ones, but is there anything we missed in this conversation? Any major holes? It's like, I really wish
there's something called Waymarked Trails, and maybe you can put this in the show notes. It's hiking.waymarkedtrails.org, and basically it has all of the walking. I'm not sure if it has all, but it has many, many, many of the walking trails in Europe on this amazing map.
Oh yeah, okay, I see it right here. Wow,
so that's a good one. Yeah.
I'll link up to that as well. Thank you so very much for your time, and best of luck with the book and everything, and look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Cheers. There you have it. Thank you to Kathy for stopping by the show. A couple of my favorite moments from that chat. First of all, her advice on how to find a compromise when you are trying to plan a trip with somebody else and you have two different ideas of what adventure means to each of you.
Say out into the universe, we're looking for some trip that's going to work for both of us, or and being open to having the answers come to you.
Now, whether you believe the universe is going to answer you back or not, I don't think really is the point. The point is that you're opening up the dialogue for what it really means to have an adventure together that works for both of you. And I think this is a great example of that, wanting to get the taste of adventure, but still having the comforts. There's always a way to find that balance. So I love that. And of course, wise strength. You heard Kathy speak on that in the conversation, saying, we're all stronger than we think. And maybe it's just that we have to do it at our own pace, not the external pace of the world, anyone else's pace. We need to trust our own pace. And I think that's important, which is essentially just saying we all have this inner strength. And as long as we're aware of that inner wisdom, and maybe we don't try to compare our strength to anybody else, or look at strength as a societal construct and then measure our strength against that construct. We just embrace our own wise strength, whatever that means to each of us. So I wanted to leave you with that. And a quote on strength from Hermann Hesse, who said, "Some of us think holding on makes us strong, but sometimes it is letting go." Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.
Thank you for listening to the Trails Around the World podcast. Please visit us online at trailsaroundtheworld.com, and please join our Facebook group under the same name. If you liked this podcast, please help us out by leaving a review on your favorite podcast source. This is Sky King, and I look forward to you joining us next time. In the meantime, happy trails to you, and please remember to leave no trace as you enjoy the outdoors.